I'm Julia Willebrand, and I'm running for New York City Comptroller, spelled with a P.
Could you tell me a little bit about the Comptroller office, what you would be doing?
The Comptroller's office, the mission is to protect the financial health of New York City. That means that in general, the Comptroller audits all New York City's contracts with private contractors. Last year, there was 38,000 private companies that the city was contracting with. That means that the auditor, the Comptroller, in conjunction with other trustees of the $150 billion New York City, five New York City employee retirement funds, the Comptroller gets to recommend the investment. So if I were an elected Comptroller, I would immediately recommend what's a new campaign now, divesting from fossil fuels because of climate change. If we don't start to do something about tackling this at its root, the root being the oil and gas industries, we are likely to be doomed, especially in the city that's on a waterfront city, totally. So those are two major tasks of the Comptroller's office: auditing the contracts and recommending investments in the retirement fund. But I, as a Comptroller, would add to that. If we're going to protect the city's financial health, we have to do something very important. We have to look at the budget. And we have to look at the budget, and the city has 300,000 employees. Those employees clean our streets, drive our ambulances, teach our children, put out our fires. They do an awful lot. And I, as a Comptroller, would need to check to make sure that the dollars to pay those bills are in the budget. Now, there's a big problem with the dollars to pay those bills being in the budget. The Comptroller doesn't have anything to say about how the dollars get there. They get there through taxes. And the biggest drain on taxes right now, as long as you don't think that putting out fires or cleaning streets is a drain on taxes, which some people do, but as long as you don't think that, who's draining? The people draining the taxes in New York City right now are the 1%. The financial industry and the real estate developers. They are getting endless subsidies. I saw recently an estimation that last year developers got $2 billion in last year in subsidies. Those are subsidies to build stadiums that are profit making for them. There's subsidies to build luxury housing. The New York City Housing Authority has offered developers the opportunity to use playgrounds in public housing projects to put luxury housing up. That is an enormous drain on the city. And the next subsidy is, once they put the luxury housing up, they get 20-year tax abatements for their luxury housing, and they transfer that to the buyers of the condos that are the luxury housing. For instance, a Russian oligarch the year before last, bought an $80 million apartment for his daughter, who was a student at Columbia University. And it came with a 20-year tax abatement. So that means that the Russian oligarch and his daughter are living in an apartment where we, the taxpayers, are paying for the fire protection, the police protection, the sanitation work, the bridges and the streets and everything else. They're getting a free ride. Those free rides are enormous, and the Comptroller's job is to protect the financial health. Now, obviously, we have to protect it against drain. Since the Comptroller doesn't have legal authority, I can't pass a bill to raise the taxes or stop those subsidies. The only thing that I can do, but I think it's an important thing, is I can tell the New York City voter and New York City citizens how they are being ripped off by the welfare scams of the 1%. The billionaires in the city get free, they don't have to pay taxes for the services that we're giving them. So I would establish a Department of Public Outrage, the Public Outrage Department, and let the public know what should be outraging them. How many endless gifts that we, the taxpayers, are making to developers and corporations. I just read about last year an attempt by Comptroller Liu to cancel a contract Mayor Bloomberg had contracted with a private organization, and he was going to pay them $20 million to mount a hire teacher campaign. In other words, it was a recruitment campaign to bring teachers into New York City. He was spending $20 million on a private organization to do that at the same time that he and his chancellor were laying off 4,000 teachers. Insanity. Lay off thousands of teachers and pay a private company was obviously a gift. And when the comptroller tried to stop it, he failed because the law is not appropriate to stopping this kind of giveaway. So, a Department of Public Outrage where it's blasted all over the city what's happening would in fact stop many of these things, and that's one of the ways I would use the office.
Why do you think those things haven't been in the news more? Why do you think it hasn't been on blast?
Well, it hasn't been on blast because who owns all of the private for-profit corporations own all of the major media. And it is not an accident that it's not in their interest to let the citizens of the city know what's happening. And the other piece of it is the fact that the politicians who are elected to office are elected with huge campaign donations and a structured campaign finance that is set up just to keep reinvesting in the same politicians that are elected all the time. A good example is I'm the Comptroller candidate. I'm on the ballot because New York State Greens have ballot status, and I am on the ballot, but I was not eligible for campaign finance matching funds. The reason being that I had to raise $250,000 before I could become eligible. Anthony Weiner, who everyone knows who Anthony Weiner is, he was eligible for that and got it. He got a couple of $1 million for this frivolous nonsense campaign that he was running. That's because the structure of the campaign finance matching funds is designed to reward the incumbents and the politicians that are already bought and paid for by the corporations. So the reason why our citizens don't know about these things is the major media is in cahoots with the rest of them. A perfect example of the kind of thing that they do. Now, the New York Times has reputation as the best mainstream news media in the country. And a couple of weeks ago, they did a major first page one story about the city of Richmond in California. City with 250,000 citizens, a blue-collar city, and a blue-collar city that's under great stress due to foreclosures. So many of the homes are underwater, meaning that they're worth less than the mortgages, and they are unable to pay the mortgages, so the banks have been foreclosing on those mortgages. But that's very destructive to the city's structure, in fact. If too many people are evicted and there are empty houses all over the city. So the mayor of Richmond decided to use eminent domain. Eminent domain, by the way, was used by the New York Times when they wanted a new building on 8th Avenue in the 40s. They picked a building that they wanted, and it was a fully occupied building owned by someone, by owners who had it fully paying and making money, and said, no, we don't want to sell it. And so the New York Times went to the state legislature, and they, by eminent domain, took the building from the owners. And New York Times knocked it down and put a new building up. So eminent domain works for the 1%. But the New York Times wrote this story about what happened in Richmond when the mayor started taking by eminent domain the homes that the banks had foreclosed on, meaning that they paid the bank what the house was worth or the apartment was worth now. It's immediate value as opposed to the mortgage. So what were the banks going to do with those foreclosed? They were going to do some kind of a scam, no doubt, with a developer or something to hand them it. But now they couldn't because the mayor of Richmond, California decided to use what's good for the 1% is good for us too. Took them by eminent domain, gave them back to the people that had lost them and allowed them to start paying again. And guess what? The New York Times did a big story on this. The only thing is they neglected to mention the fact that the mayor of Richmond, California, Gail McLaughlin, is a Green. She's an elected Green. As far as most people in the United States know, nobody ever got elected Green. And they use that, and it's presented that way because, and then voters think it's hopeless. Why would I vote for them? They can't get elected. But that's a tautology. As long as you say, why would I vote for you? You can't get elected. There's self-fulfilling prophecy. For sure, you won't get elected if everybody says that, right? So that's.
And very quickly, could you just give me a little background about yourself?
Oh, now let's see. Native New Yorker, fourth generation. Great-great-grandfather was 10 years old on a Spanish sailing vessel that arrived in Red Hook Harbor in 1840, and he jumped ship. And he went to work in a tinsmith yard, which is the same thing as a roofer. And my grandfather was a roofer with a small business in Brooklyn. So we have a very, very long history in my family of being New Yorkers. Graduated from City College, went to Columbia Teachers College, 2 master's and a doctor's degree as a non-traditional student. I didn't start till I was about 35, but that led to a career in education, a very busy one. The last thing I did before I got deeply involved in politics was I was a Fulbright professor to Hungary, teaching faculty at Technical University there, methods of teaching languages. So that's it. Oh, one more thing. I say I was a hippie in the village, and my son says, no, you weren't a hippie, Mom, you were a beatnik. So at one time I was a hippie in the village, waitressing, and I loved it. I was very happy at it, but I'm happy at this kind of environmental stuff I do now.
Thank you very much.